The recruitment station on Centauri Prime buzzed with activity as beings from dozens of worlds waited in long lines. Commander Zixtel adjusted his position behind the metal desk and looked at the next file with tired eyes. Another day of processing. Applications from newly discovered species meant another day of sorting through primitive warriors and basic infantry candidates. The file in his blue-scaled hands read, Human Earth Sol System, across the top. Zixtel had processed 17 human applications already this week, and each one looked exactly the same. Limited spaceflight capability, primitive weapons technology, and basic military organization. The species had only achieved faster than light travel 3 months ago when the Empire made first contact. Like most new species, they seemed eager to join the galactic community and contribute what little they could offer. Jake Morrison walked through the sliding doors of the recruitment center and took his place in line. The 34-year-old human looked around at the alien beings surrounding him with quiet curiosity. Tall insect-like creatures with 4 arms chatted with floating gas-filled beings that communicated through color changes. A group of rock-like entities stood perfectly still near the wall, their crystalline eyes occasionally flashing with internal light. When Jake's turn came, he approached the desk where Commander Zixtel waited. The Vortanian officer looked up from his datapad with the same bored expression he had worn all day. His reptilian features showed no particular interest as he gestured for Jake to sit in the chair across from him. Name and homeworld, Zixtel said in the standard galactic tongue, which Jake's translation device converted to English. Jake Morrison, Earth, Sol System, Jake replied. Handing over his military service records, Zixtel scanned through the documents with practice speed. 12 years of service, multiple deployments, flight training, combat experience. Standard stuff for a warrior species, though the technology descriptions seemed particularly primitive. Something called an F-16 Fighting Falcon caught his attention. Briefly, but the specifications showed it could barely break the sound barrier. You have experience with atmospheric flight combat, Zixtel noted, making marks on his evaluation form. Limited to single-planet operations, chemical propulsion systems, projectile weapons. Yes, sir, Jake said simply. Combat experience across multiple dotters? Zixtel paused at the unfamiliar term. What does this mean exactly? Jake shifted slightly in his chair. Different war zones on Earth, sir. Afghanistan, Iraq, Syria, a few other places. The commander nodded and made another note. Most primitive species had territorial conflicts before achieving spaceflight. Usually these were minor affairs involving small numbers of combatants fighting over resources or territory. Nothing that would translate well to modern galactic warfare. How many enemy combatants did you personally engage? Zixtel asked the standard question. In direct combat? Hard to say exactly, sir. Maybe 100 or so. Zixtel looked up from his pad. You engaged 100 enemy soldiers in personal combat? No, sir, not hand-to-hand, air-to-air mostly, some ground strikes. Different types of engagements? The commander relaxed and returned to his paperwork. Of course, the human meant long-range primitive weapons. Most species went through a phase where they used projectiles or basic energy weapons before developing proper military technology. The fact that this one had survived multiple engagements suggested basic competence, which was more than many. New species could claim any leadership experience? Squadron leader for my last 3 years of service. Managed training programs for new pilots. Zixtel made appropriate marks on the evaluation form. Leadership experience with primitive forces might translate to useful skills in the Empire's military structure. The human seemed calm and professional, which were valuable traits even in basic infantry roles. Medical issues, psychological problems, addiction to substances? Zixtel ran through the standard checklist. No, sir, clean record. Family ties that would prevent extended deployment? Jake hesitated for just a moment. My wife died 2 years ago, no children. Nothing keeping me on? Earth, the commander noted the response without emotion. Personal loss often motivated beings to seek new purposes in military service. It usually made them more focused and reliable soldiers. The Empire's military has several divisions suited to your background and species capabilities, Zixtel began. The standard recruitment speech. Basic infantry, support roles, planetary security forces. Given your flight experience with primitive atmospheric craft, you might qualify for our auxiliary pilot program. What does that involve? Training on proper space-capable fighters, basic formation flying, escort duties for supply convoys. Nothing too complex until you prove yourself with real military technology, Jake nodded. Sounds good to me, sir. Zixtel stamped the application and handed Jake a data chip. Report to the Imperial Fighter Academy on Kepler Station next week. You'll undergo 6 months of basic training before any operational assignments. Your species is classified as militarily inexperienced but potentially useful with proper instruction. Jake left the recruitment center. 2 more humans entered and took their places in line. Lisa Campbell had served 8 years as a Navy pilot flying missions off aircraft carriers. Tony Rodriguez had been a Marine aviator specializing in close air support for ground troops. Both carried service records similar to Jake's, and both would receive identical classifications from Commander Zixtel outside the recruitment station. Jake met up with the other humans who had been processed that day. 12 men and women, old veterans of Earth's various military branches, all assigned to basic training programs. They seem nice enough, Lisa said as she looked at her assignment data chip. Pretty standard military bureaucracy from what I can tell. Did anyone else get the feeling they think we're kind of primitive? Asked Tony. Jake smiled slightly. Can't blame them, really. Our best fighters barely make it out of the atmosphere. Their worst probably fly faster than anything we've ever built. Going to be interesting learning their systems, Lisa said. I just hope the controls aren't too different from what we're used to. The group made their way toward the transport hub that would take them to Kepler Station. None of them were particularly worried about the training ahead. They had all learned new aircraft systems before, adapted to different combat environments, and proven themselves in difficult situations. How hard could it be to learn alien military technology? Behind them, Commander Zixtel continued processing applications. The humans seemed like decent candidates for basic positions, though nothing special compared to other warrior species the Empire had recruited over the centuries. Their primitive technology and limited combat experience meant they would need extensive training before becoming useful. Still, every species had to start somewhere, and the humans appeared willing to learn. What Zixtel did not know was that Jake Morrison's limited combat experience included 37 confirmed kills in air-to-air combat, with probable kills reaching nearly double that number. Lisa Campbell had flown over 200 combat missions in some of the most dangerous airspace on Earth. Tony Rodriguez had provided close air support for Marines, fighting in urban environments where split-second decisions meant the difference between saving friendly troops and causing civilian casualties. The Empire was about to discover that Earth's definition of limited combat experience was very different from the rest of the galaxy's understanding of warfare. The Imperial Fighter Academy on Kepler Station stretched across 3 massive hangars connected by metal walkways that hummed with artificial gravity generators. Jake Morrison stood in formation with 40 other new recruits from 12 different species, all of them assigned to Basic Fighter Training Squadron 7. The humans made up less than half the group, with the rest being equally primitive species that the Empire had recently discovered. Instructor Korthik Prime stood before them on 4 powerful legs, his gray armored, hide-bearing scars from what looked like serious combat. The Korthik were known throughout the Empire as natural warriors, their homeworld having produced some of the finest military officers in galactic history. His yellow eyes swept across the recruits with obvious disappointment. "You are the bottom tier," Korthik Prime announced in his grinding voice. "Species with no real military tradition, no understanding of proper warfare, no concept of what it means to fight in the void between stars. Most of you will wash out within the first month. Those who remain will spend years learning what warrior species understand instinctively." Jake listened without reaction, his face showing the same neutral expression he had worn through countless military briefings on Earth. Beside him, Lisa Campbell stood at attention with the posture of someone who had done this many times before. Tony Rodriguez kept his eyes forward, but Jake could see the slight smile at the corner of his mouth that meant he was finding something amusing. The instructor led them into Hangar Bay 2, where dozens of sleek fighters sat in neat rows. The craft looked nothing like Earth's angular military jets. These ships were smooth and curved, with weapon pods that glowed softly blue and engines that seemed to bend space around them. Each fighter was easily 3 times the size of an F-16, and probably 50 times more advanced. "These are Vortex-class training fighters," Korthik Prime explained. "Simplified versions of real military craft. Even these basic models are more sophisticated than anything your species have ever built. Do not expect to master them quickly." The first week involved classroom instruction on basic flight principles that seemed designed for beings who had never flown anything before. Jake found himself learning about concepts like 3-dimensional movement and vacuum maneuvering that any Earth pilot would consider elementary. The alien instructor spoke slowly and used simple examples, clearly expecting their students to struggle with basic ideas. When they finally got into the simulators, the difference became obvious. Most of the alien recruits moved carefully through the exercises, following precise patterns they had memorized from their instruction manuals. They flew like beings who had learned everything from textbooks without ever experiencing the chaos of real combat. Jake slipped into the pilot's seat of his assigned simulator and ran through the pre-flight checklist. The controls were different from Earth fighters, but the basic principles remained the same: thrust, lift, attitude control, weapon systems. The technology was vastly superior, but the fundamental concepts of making something fly and fight in 3 dimensions had not changed. The first exercise was simple formation flying in open space. Most recruits struggled to maintain proper distance and heading while dealing with the complex flight controls. Jake found the movements natural and instinctive, his hands working the controls with the unconscious skill that came from thousands of hours in military aircraft. "Human Morrison," Korthik Prime's voice came through the communication system. "You are deviating from prescribed flight patterns." "Sorry, sir, just felt more natural to fly this way," Jake responded, adjusting his position back to the approved formation. The instructor made a note on his evaluation pad. Undisciplined flying was common among primitive species who had never learned proper military procedures. Still, the humans' actual flying seemed competent enough for someone from such a limited background. The second week brought combat simulations. The exercise was straightforward: engage enemy drones in a controlled environment with limited ammunition and specific rules of engagement. Most species approached it like a careful puzzle, methodically working through each target while following the tactical procedures they had been taught. Jake looked at the tactical display showing 12 enemy drones arranged in a standard attack formation. Something about the setup triggered instincts developed in years of actual combat. These were not random targets to be eliminated one by one. This was a coordinated enemy force with mutual support and overlapping fields of fire. The proper response was not to follow the manual, but to break their formation and create opportunities for quick kills. He rolled his fighter hard left and dove below the drone formation, coming up behind their lead elements while their sensors were still tracking his last position. His first missile took out the command drone, his second destroyed the communications relay, and his guns eliminated 3 more before the remaining drones even realized they were under attack. The exercise ended with all 12 enemy drones destroyed in less than 90 seconds. Jake's ammunition expenditure was half what the manual said was normal for this scenario. His simulated damage was 0. Korth AK Prime stared at his display screen in confusion. The computer must have malfunctioned. No recruit, especially from a primitive species, could achieve those results on their second week of training. He ran the simulation again with different parameters. Jake destroyed 15 drones in 2 minutes, then 18 drones in 3 minutes. Each time his tactics were different: adapted to the specific situation rather than following memorized procedures. Each time his performance exceeded what the training computers expected from graduate-level pilots. "Explain your tactical approach," Korthik Prime demanded after the fourth run. Jake considered his answer carefully. "Hit the command and control elements first, break up their formation. Then pick off isolated targets before they can regroup." "Basic fighter tactics, sir." The instructor made more notes. Luck could explain one good run, but not 4 consecutive perfect scores. Still, the human was just applying primitive instincts to advanced technology. Probably the tactics he had learned fighting other humans in their crude atmospheric battles. Lisa Campbell ran the same simulation and achieved similar results. Her approach was different from Jake's, more methodical but equally devastating. She treated the drones like surface-to-air missile sites that needed to be eliminated in a specific sequence to minimize risk. Tony Rodriguez flew like someone providing close air support, his movements aggressive and precise as he eliminated threats that might endanger friendly ground forces. By the end of the month, all 12 humans were consistently outperforming their classmates in combat simulations. Their scores were not just better but dramatically better, often exceeding what the training computers had been programmed to expect from any recruit. The other alien species began avoiding the humans during off-duty hours. There was something unsettling about beings who treated simulated combat like a familiar game. Most species found their first combat training stressful and difficult. The humans seemed relaxed, almost bored. Korthik Prime found himself reviewing their files again. Earth was classified as a peaceful planet that had recently achieved spaceflight. Their military technology was primitive and their combat experience limited to minor territorial disputes. Nothing in their records suggested they should be natural fighters, yet day after day, the humans demonstrated flying skills and tactical thinking that surpassed recruits from traditional warrior species. They moved through combat exercises with an ease that suggested extensive experience with three-dimensional combat. Despite coming from a world where most fighting happened on flat ground, the instructor began to suspect that either the human files contained errors or Earth's definition of limited combat experience was very different from the galactic standard. Theises moved through the Academy's data archives with the quiet grace that made her species excellent researchers. The librarian caste of her homeworld had evolved specifically for gathering and analyzing information, and her curiosity about the strange human recruits had been growing stronger each day. Their performance in combat simulations defied every expectation about primitive species, and Theises could not let the mystery rest. The archive computers hummed softly as she accessed the basic files on Earth and its inhabitants, standard first. Contact reports showed a species that had achieved faster-than-light travel only months ago, with technology that barely qualified as spacefaring. Their military organization seemed simple, their weapons primitive, their combat experience limited to what the Empire classified as minor territorial disputes, but something about Jake Morrison's casual answers during training sessions bothered her. When instructor Korthik Prime had asked about his combat experience, the human had shrugged and said, "A few conflicts back home," like it was nothing important. Yet his flying and tactical skills suggested someone with extensive military training that went far beyond basic territorial skirmishes. Theises began digging deeper into Earth's historical records, using her access codes to pull information that went beyond the standard first contact summaries. What she found in the first hour of research made her pause and read the data again. To make sure she was understanding it correctly, Earth had not experienced peace for more than a few decades at any point in their recorded history. The planet showed evidence of constant warfare dating back thousands of years, with conflicts involving millions of combatants and casualty numbers that seemed impossible for a single world to sustain. The deeper she dug, the more disturbing the picture became. Earth's humans did not fight occasional wars over resources or territory like most species. They fought continuously, developing new weapons and tactics at a pace that suggested warfare was their primary cultural activity, their history read. like a manual for military evolution, with each generation perfecting new ways to kill more efficiently than the last dot she pulled up. Jake Morrison's specific military record and cross-referenced it with Earth's recent conflicts. The human had served in something called the Afghanistan War, which had lasted over 20 years and involved multiple Earth nations. His deployment record showed 3 separate tours of duty in what Earth classified as high-intensity combat. Zones. The casualty statistics made Tice's blood run cold. Single battles on Earth produced more deaths than most galactic species had experienced in their entire military histories. Individual soldiers like Jake had been exposed to more combat in a few years than the Empire's most experienced veterans saw in their entire careers. She searched for more specific information about Jake's service record and found references to confirmed kills and probable kills that suggested individual soldiers were expected to personally eliminate enemy combatants as a routine part of their duties. Most Empire military personnel could serve entire careers without ever directly engaging an enemy in lethal combat. The research terminal chimed with an incoming message from her supervisor, but Thizes ignored it. She had found something that changed everything about how the Empire should be evaluating human military potential. Jake Morrison's limited combat experience included 37 confirmed kills in air-to-air combat. But this was just one human from one military unit from one nation on Earth. The planet had dozens of nations, hundreds of military units, and thousands of pilots with similar experience levels. What the Empire had classified as a peaceful species with primitive military capabilities was actually a world of professional warriors. Thizes gathered her research files and headed directly to Commander Zixtal's office. The Vortanian officer looked up from his paperwork with mild irritation at being interrupted, but his expression changed quickly when he saw the data Thizes was carrying. "Commander, I need to show you what I've found about the human recruits," Thizes said, placing her data pad on his desk. Zixtal scanned the first few pages of her research and frowned. "This cannot be accurate. Earth was classified as recently spacefaring with limited military experience. Their technology assessments showed primitive weapons and basic organization." "The technology assessments were correct, sir. Their weapons are primitive by our standards. But look at how they use those primitive weapons." She showed him casualty statistics from Earth's recent conflicts. Numbers that represented individual battles exceeded the total military deaths for most Empire member species across their entire histories. Earth's humans had been fighting continuously for millennia, perfecting warfare while other species developed art, science, and philosophy. "This Jake Morrison," Thizes continued, pulling up his specific records. His kill count of 37. Confirmed enemies destroyed would make him a legendary warrior by Empire standards. But according to Earth's military classification system, he's considered an average pilot with standard combat experience. Commander Zixtal stared at the data for several long minutes. If these numbers were accurate, then every human recruit currently in training had more actual combat experience than most Empire officers would gain in their entire careers. The species the Empire had dismissed as militarily inexperienced was actually composed of natural-born warriors. "Bring Morrison to my office immediately," Zixtal ordered. 20 minutes later, Jake stood at attention in front of the commander's desk. His posture was relaxed but respectful, showing none of the nervousness that most recruits displayed when called before senior officers. "Morrison, I need you to clarify some information about your military background," Zixtal began. "When you were recruited, you mentioned combat experience in several conflicts. Can you be more specific about the nature of that combat?" Jake considered his answer. "Air-to-air combat mostly, sir. Fighter escort missions, ground attack operations, some air superiority patrols, standard pilot duties." "How many enemy aircraft did you personally destroy?" 37 confirmed kills, sir. Probably twice that number in total, but you can only count the ones you can prove." The commander's eyes widened. In the Empire's military, destroying 37 enemy fighters would earn a pilot the highest decorations and legendary status. This human spoke about it like routine paperwork. And this is considered normal for Earth pilots? Jake shrugged. Slightly. Pretty average for someone with my deployment time, sir. Some guys had a lot more kills, some had less. Depends on where you were stationed and what kind of missions you flew. Zixtel looked at Thizes, who nodded grimly. Her research had shown that Jake's assessment was accurate. Earth had produced thousands of military pilots with similar or better combat records. Morrison, when you said you served in several conflicts, how would you describe the scale of those conflicts? The Afghanistan operation involved about 100,000 troops at peak deployment, sir. Iraq was larger, maybe 150,000. Those were just the forces from my country. Other nations contributed their own units. The numbers were staggering. Single Earth conflicts involved more combatants than the Empire typically deployed across entire sectors. And Jake was describing these massive military operations like they were routine events that happened regularly on his homeworld. How many such conflicts has Earth experienced in recent years? Jake thought for a moment. Major operations? Maybe a dozen in the last 20 years. Smaller conflicts and peacekeeping missions happen pretty regularly. Hard to keep count of all of them. Commander Zixtel realized that the Empire had made a catastrophic error in assessing human military capabilities. They had recruited what they thought were primitive warriors with limited experience. Instead, they had brought aboard soldiers from a world where warfare was so common that planet-scale military operations were considered. Routine events, the species the Empire had placed in basic training, were actually the most experienced combat veterans in galactic history. The Outer Rim territories had become a problem that Empire High Command could no longer ignore. The Zealot Consortium, a militant alliance of aggressive species from beyond Empire space, had been conducting increasingly bold raids against frontier settlements and trade routes. Traditional Empire military doctrine called for defensive formations and overwhelming numbers to minimize casualties, but the Zelax fought with a savage intensity that made conventional tactics ineffective. Jake Morrison received his combat assignment 3 weeks ahead of schedule. Commander Zixtal had personally recommended the human pilots for immediate active duty, despite protests from other training officers who insisted the recruits needed more time to learn proper Empire military procedures. The truth was that the Empire needed fighters who could match Zelic aggression, and the humans had already proven they understood combat in ways that textbook-trained pilots did not. The assignment briefing took place aboard the Empire cruiser Steadfast, a massive vessel that served as the command ship for Frontier Defense Fleet 7. Jake sat with Lisa Campbell and Tony Rodriguez in a briefing room filled with pilots from 6 different species, most of whom had years more training than the human newcomers. Fleet Admiral Korath, a veteran Korthak officer with decades of military experience, stood before the assembled pilots with obvious frustration showing on his scarred features. Behind him, a holographic display showed the locations of recent Zelic attacks, marked in angry red symbols across a dozen star systems. The enemy has changed tactics, Admiral Korath announced. Previously, they conducted hit-and-run raids against isolated targets. Now they are operating in larger formations, staying to fight rather than retreating when we respond. Our standard defensive protocols are not stopping them. The display shifted to show combat footage from the most recent engagement. Zelic fighters moved in loose, aggressive formations that swarmed over Empire patrol squadrons like angry insects. Their tactics were chaotic and violent, ignoring proper military procedure in favor of overwhelming assault. Empire pilots trained to fight in careful formations with coordinated support struggled to respond to such undisciplined aggression. Human Squadron 7, Admiral Korath continued. You will be assigned to patrol Sector 12, considered a low-risk area with minimal enemy activity. Use this deployment to gain experience with Empire equipment before taking on more challenging assignments. Jake exchanged glances with Lisa and Tony. Being assigned to the quiet sector was clearly meant to keep the inexperienced humans out of serious danger while they learned proper military procedures. It was exactly the kind of cautious approach that Jake had seen countless times in Earth's military when commanders wanted to protect green troops. 2 days later, Jake was flying patrol in the outer edges of Sector 12 when his sensors detected something that should not have been there. A large formation of ships was moving through what was supposed to be empty space, heading directly toward a civilian transport convoy that was following the approved trade route between two Empire colonies. "Control, this is Human Leader," Jake reported over the communication system. "I have multiple unknown contacts bearing 270, range approximately 50,000 kilometers. They appear to be intercepting civilian traffic." The response from Fleet Command came back with typical Empire caution. "Human Leader, maintain observation distance and report enemy movements. Do not engage without backup. Reinforcements are being dispatched to your location." Jake watched his tactical display as the unknown ships closed on the civilian convoy. 18 large transports carrying families and supplies between Empire worlds, protected by only 4 light escort fighters. The attacking force numbered at least 30 ships, moving in the same aggressive formation pattern they had seen in the briefings about Zelic raiders. "Lisa, Tony, you seeing this?" Jake asked on the squadron frequency. "Copy that, Jake," Lisa responded. "Looks like a full attack formation moving on those transports. Escort fighters are already breaking off." The civilian escorts were following. Standard Empire doctrine, pulling back to defensive positions and calling for help. It was the proper military response according to every manual Jake had studied at the academy. But those transports were full of families, and the Zelic raiders were not known for taking prisoners. Jake made the decision that would have gotten him court-martialed in the Empire military, but was standard procedure for any Earth pilot with his training. He did not wait for backup or request permission to engage. He simply rolled his fighter toward the enemy formation and accelerated to attack speed. "Human Leader, you are ordered to maintain safe distance," came the frantic call from Fleet Command. "Copy, Control, we are engaging the enemy." Jake replied calmly as he armed his weapon systems. The Zelic raiders had expected the human fighters to follow Empire doctrine and wait for reinforcements. Instead, they found themselves under attack by 3 pilots who fought like nothing they had encountered before. Jake came in high and fast, targeting the command ship with his first missile strike, while Lisa flanked the formation from below and Tony provided cover fire that kept the enemy from organizing a proper response. What followed was exactly the kind of aggressive, coordinated combat that Earth pilots had perfected over decades of actual warfare. Jake used tactics that no Empire manual taught, breaking the Zelic formation apart and creating opportunities for Lisa and Tony to eliminate isolated targets. They flew like pilots who had been fighting for their lives since their first day of training, because that was exactly what they were. The battle lasted 8 minutes. When it ended, 17 Zelic raiders had been destroyed and the remainder were fleeing back toward the frontier. The civilian convoy continued safely toward its destination. Human Squadron 7 had taken no casualties and expended less ammunition than Empire doctrine said was normal for such an engagement. The after-action reports caused chaos at fleet headquarters. 3 inexperienced pilots from a primitive species had just accomplished what veteran Empire squadrons struggled to achieve. They had engaged a superior enemy force without authorization, defeated them decisively, and saved civilian lives while following none of the approved tactical procedures. Admiral Korath read the combat recordings 3 times before he believed what he was seeing. The human pilots had moved and fought with a coordination that suggested years of training together. Yet this was their first actual combat mission. Their tactics were completely outside Empire military doctrine, yet they had been devastatingly effective against an enemy that had been causing problems for months. "Get me Commander Zixtel immediately," the Admiral ordered. "I need to know everything there is to know about these human pilots." Jake was completing his post-flight inspection when the communication came through ordering him to report to Admiral Korath's office immediately. As he walked through the corridors of the Steadfast, other pilots watched him with expressions ranging from admiration to suspicion. Word of Human Squadron 7's unauthorized engagement had spread quickly through the ship. When he entered the Admiral's office, Jake found himself facing not just Admiral Korath but also several other senior officers whose expressions suggested they were not sure whether to promote him or arrest him. "Morrison," Admiral Korath began, "explained to me how 3 pilots on their first combat mission managed to destroy 17 enemy fighters without taking a single hit." Jake considered his answer carefully. "We saw civilians in danger and neutralized." "The threat, sir, standard fighter tactics?" The Admiral stared at him for a long moment. Standard for whom exactly? News of Human Squadron 7's victory spread through Empire military channels faster than official reports could follow. Within days, fleet commanders across the frontier were requesting human pilots for their most difficult assignments. Jake Morrison found himself promoted to squadron leader and assigned to train mixed-species flight groups in what Empire Command was now calling aggressive tactical procedures. The promotion came with access to better equipment and more challenging missions. Jake's new fighter was a top-line interceptor-class vessel with weapon systems that could destroy capital ships and engines, capable of faster-than-light combat maneuvering. The technology was beyond anything Earth had ever produced, but Jake adapted to it with the same natural ease he had shown with the training fighters. His first assignment as squadron leader was to work with a group of Korthic pilots who had specifically requested human tactical instruction. The proud warrior species had initially resented the idea of learning from primitive newcomers, but reports of human combat effectiveness had reached even their homeworld. If these strange beings from Earth could defeat enemies that challenged traditional Korthic tactics, then perhaps their methods were worth studying. Wing Commander Thaktar was a veteran Korthic pilot with over 2 decades of military service and more than 100 successful missions. He had volunteered to train with the humans partly out of curiosity and partly because his own squadron had struggled against Zelek raiders using conventional Empire tactics. When he met Jake for the first time, the massive alien warrior towered over the human pilot by nearly 2 feet. "I have read your combat reports," Thaktar said in his rumbling voice. "Your tactics are reckless and dangerous. You ignore proper formation discipline and attack superior forces without adequate preparation." Jake nodded respectfully. "Yes, sir. That's accurate. Yet you achieve victory with minimal casualties and maximum enemy destruction. Explain this contradiction." "We're not trying to avoid risk, sir. We're trying to control it." "Big difference." The training sessions that followed challenged everything the Empire had taught about proper military conduct. Jake showed the alien pilots how to break formation when necessary, how to use aggressive maneuvering to create tactical opportunities, and how to make split-second decisions without waiting for command approval. Most importantly, he taught them to think of combat as something to be won quickly and decisively rather than managed carefully, and defensively, Thaktar proved to be an excellent student. His natural Korthic warrior instincts adapted well to human tactical concepts, and soon he was leading his own pilots in attacks that resembled Earth-style fighter combat more than traditional Empire operations. The results were immediate and dramatic. Korthic squadrons trained by human instructors began achieving victory ratios that exceeded anything in their military history, but not everyone in the Empire was pleased with human military success. On the core worlds, political leaders watched with growing concern as primitive newcomers rapidly advanced through military ranks based on nothing but combat effectiveness. Traditional promotion systems that rewarded education, political connections, and years of service were being bypassed in favor of beings who simply won battles. Senator Vexhai of the Diplomatic Corps raised the issue in an emergency session of the Empire Council. The elderly politician had served in government for over 40 years and believed strongly in maintaining proper order within military hierarchies. "These humans are disrupting established promotion protocols," Senator Vexhai argued to his fellow council members. "They have been in our military for less than 6 months, yet they now hold leadership positions over species with decades of training and experience. This sets a dangerous precedent." Other council members nodded in agreement. The Empire had always maintained careful balance between different member species, ensuring that no single group dominated military or political leadership. Allowing humans to advance too quickly could upset delicate relationships that had taken centuries to establish. Meanwhile, on the frontier, Jake's kill count continued to climb at a rate that made Empire record-keepers double-check their calculations. Each major engagement added dozens of confirmed enemy destructions to his total. The Battle of Kepler's Edge alone accounted for 43 enemy fighters destroyed in a single day, when Jake led a combined human Korthic force against a massive Zellic attack on a mining colony. The engagement had started badly for the Empire defenders. 3 full squadrons of traditional pilots had been overwhelmed by Zellic raiders using their typical swarming tactics. When Jake arrived with his mixed squadron, the mining colony was under direct assault and civilian evacuation ships were being destroyed as they tried to escape. Jake made the kind of tactical decision that no Empire commander would have approved. Instead of trying to establish defensive positions around the colony, he took his entire force directly into the heart of the enemy formation. The attack was so aggressive and unexpected that the Zellic raiders found themselves fighting individual battles against pilots who moved and struck like predators rather than soldiers. Lisa Campbell distinguished herself during the battle by coordinating precision strikes against enemy command ships while under heavy fire. Her ability to maintain tactical awareness during chaotic combat impressed even veteran Korthic pilots who had thought themselves the finest warriors in the galaxy. Tony Rodriguez provided close support that allowed the mixed squadron to operate as a unified force despite coming from different species with different training backgrounds. The victory at Kepler's Edge marked a turning point in the frontier war. For the first time, Empire forces had not just defeated a major Zellic attack, but had completely destroyed the enemy formation with minimal friendly casualties. Security recordings of the battle were studied at military academies throughout Empire space, and human tactical manuals became required reading for pilot training programs. Yet the political pressure continued to build. Senator Vexhai and his supporters argued that humans were being promoted too quickly and given too much influence over Empire military doctrine. They pointed out that rapid advancement based purely on combat success had historically led to military coups and political instability. Commander Zixtel found himself caught between political demands and military necessity. His original assessment of human capabilities had been completely wrong, and now he was being pressured to either slow their advancement or find ways to limit their influence. But every report from the frontier showed the same pattern: units with human leadership or human-trained pilots consistently outperformed traditional Empire forces. The solution came from an unexpected source. Wing Commander Thaktar submitted a formal recommendation to Empire High Command requesting that human tactical instruction be expanded to all frontier units. The prestigious Korthak officer argued that human methods were not replacing traditional Empire military doctrine but enhancing it. These beings from Earth do not fight like primitives, Thaktar wrote in his report. They fight like evolution designed them specifically for warfare. Their methods work because they understand combat at an instinctive level that cannot be taught through normal training. The recommendation carried enormous weight coming from a respected Korthic veteran. Within weeks, Jake found himself promoted again and assigned to establish formal training programs for Empire pilots throughout the frontier sectors. His kill count had reached triple digits, making him one of the most successful pilots in recorded Galactic history. But more importantly, his teaching was creating a new generation of Empire pilots who fought with human aggression and tactical flexibility. The galaxy was beginning to understand that Earth had not just produced a few competent fighters. They had discovered a species that treated warfare as naturally as other beings treated art or science. The High Military Council chamber on Galactic Core Station had not seen this kind of emergency session in over 2 centuries. Representatives from every major Empire species sat around the massive circular table, their attention focused on the human standing at the center of the room. Jake Morrison wore the uniform of a squadron leader, a rank that typically required 20 years of service to achieve. He had earned it in 8 months. Fleet Admiral Korath presented the final statistics to the assembled council members with a mixture of pride and bewilderment. Squadron Leader Morrison's confirmed kill count now stands at 847 enemy fighters destroyed, with probable kills exceeding 1,200. This exceeds the lifetime totals of any pilot in recorded Empire history. The numbers drew murmurs of amazement from council members who had never seen such combat statistics from a single individual. Some species had entire military branches that had not achieved 800 total kills across their entire service histories. More significantly, Admiral Korath continued, human tactical instruction has improved Empire combat effectiveness by an average of 300% across all units that have received training. Casualty rates in human-led squadrons are the lowest ever recorded, while mission success rates are the highest. Senator Vexhai shifted uncomfortably in his seat. The political opposition to rapid human advancement had crumbled in the face of undeniable military results. Every attempt to slow human promotions or limit their influence had been met with protests from field commanders who desperately needed their tactical expertise. High Admiral Zurain, Supreme Commander of all Empire military forces, gestured for Jake to approach the council table. The ancient ethereal leader had commanded Empire fleets for over a century and had never encountered anything like the human military phenomenon. Squadron Leader Morrison. High Admiral Zurain began in the whisper-soft voice that characterized his species. Your combat record is unprecedented in galactic history. Your tactical innovations have revolutionized our military doctrine. But I must ask a question that troubles many council members. Jake stood at attention, waiting for the question he had been expecting for weeks. Are you exceptional among your species, or do other humans possess similar military capabilities? The question hung in the air like a weapon waiting to detonate. Everything the Empire believed about human military potential depended on Jake's answer. If he was a unique individual, then humanity's impact on galactic warfare would remain limited. If he represented normal human capability, then the Empire had allied with something far more dangerous than they had ever imagined. Jake considered his response carefully. He had been asked this question before by various commanders, and each time he had given the same honest answer. But this time his words would be heard by the leaders of a galactic civilization and would shape policy for millions of worlds. Sir, I'm probably about average for someone with my training and deployment history, Jake said simply. Maybe a little above average in some areas, a little below in others. Earth has pilots with higher kill counts, soldiers with more combat experience, and strategists who've studied warfare their entire lives. The silence that followed was profound. Council members exchanged glances that ranged from amazement to horror as they processed the implications of Jake's statement. If an average human pilot could achieve kill counts that made him legendary by galactic standards, then Earth represented a military resource beyond anything the Empire had ever encountered. Senator Vexhai leaned forward, his voice tight with concern. How many humans like yourself exist on Earth? Active military pilots? Maybe 50,000 with significant combat experience. Recently retired pilots who could return to service, probably another 100,000. Total military personnel. With various specialties, maybe 10 million or so. The numbers were staggering. The Empire's entire military consisted of approximately 2 million active personnel drawn from hundreds of worlds. Earth alone could field 5 times that number, all with combat experience that exceeded anything galactic civilization had produced. And these numbers represent what percentage of your total population? High Admiral Zorain asked. Jake did some quick mental math. Military personnel make up maybe 3% of Earth's population, sir. Most humans are civilians who've never served in combat roles. High Counselor Tyron of the Academic Collective spoke for the first time, her voice shaking slightly. Your species maintains military forces numbering in the millions, while the majority of your population remains civilian. This suggests a level of military organization and resource dedication that implies constant preparation for large-scale warfare. Yes, ma'am, that's accurate, Jake confirmed. Earth has multiple nations, and most maintain standing military forces for defense and power projection. It's been that way for as long as anyone can remember. The council chamber erupted in quiet discussions as representatives tried to comprehend what they were hearing. Most Empire species had achieved peace through technological advancement or natural evolution toward cooperation. The idea of a world where multiple governments maintained massive military forces in constant readiness was almost incomprehensible. High Admiral Zurain called for order and addressed Jake directly. Squadron leader, based on your assessment of human military capabilities, compared to what you have observed of Empire forces, how would you evaluate our current military doctrine and organization? Jake hesitated. The question was asking him to critique the military system of a galactic civilization that had maintained peace and order for thousands of years. But his honest assessment would not be flattering to Empire military tradition. Sir, Empire forces are well-trained and disciplined. With excellent equipment and strong organizational structure, Jake began diplomatically. However, your military doctrine seems designed for maintaining peace rather than fighting wars. Most of your tactics assume that showing overwhelming force will discourage enemies from fighting seriously. And what does human experience suggest about this approach? In our experience, sir, if someone is willing to start a fight, they're usually planning to finish it regardless of the odds. Defensive tactics and overwhelming numbers work against rational enemies who can be discouraged. They don't work as well against enemies who are committed to fighting no matter what. The truth was uncomfortable but undeniable. Empire military doctrine had been designed for a galaxy where warfare was rare and most conflicts could be resolved through demonstration of superior force. The Zealot Consortium represented a type of enemy the Empire had never faced. Opponents who fought with the same total commitment that humans considered normal. High Admiral Zurain made the decision that would reshape galactic military policy for generations to come. The Empire hereby authorizes the complete revision of our military doctrine based on human tactical principles. Squadron Leader Morrison, you are promoted to Wing Commander and tasked with establishing new training protocols for all Empire military forces. The promotion made Jake one of the youngest wing commanders in Empire history and gave him authority over military units throughout galactic space. More importantly, it represented official recognition that human military methods were not just effective but necessary for the Empire's survival. As the council session ended, Jake found himself surrounded by military officers and political leaders who wanted to understand how a species could evolve such devastating military capabilities. The questions were always the same. How had humans become such natural warriors? What made Earth different from every other world that had achieved civilization? Jake's answer was always honest and terrifying in its simplicity. We're not special, sir. We're just what happens when evolution builds a species in a crucible of constant conflict. War didn't make us warriors. War made us everything we are. The Empire was beginning to understand that they had not recruited allies from a peaceful world. They had made contact with a species that had weaponized survival itself, turning the struggle for existence into an art form that other civilizations could barely comprehend. The galaxy would never be the same.